Alright, what's up, Barbarians? So, we got some new toys in the Season 5. Let's go and check them out. Let's start off with the brand new items and then go over the brand new updated uniques, which almost makes some brand new items. In some cases, these are getting some massive buffs. So, starting right off the brand new Barbarian uniques that are out in Season 5. We're looking at the right side, by the way. The other one was from an outdated PTR. But looking at the third blade over here, we've got damage to close enemies. We've got vulnerable strength, weapon mastery, and we got fury on kill. Overall, the stats on this weapon aren't really impressive, but the special unique power makes it so your weapon mastery skills are now also core skills that have no cooldowns, but fury is going to be something that you're gonna have to spend at dealing 50 to 70% of normal damage, so it doesn't even do the normal damage of the ability. The fury costs are reduced by 5 for any additional charge the skill would have had. So I'll be honest, guys, I don't think the third blade is very good. It was very underwhelming when using it, whether you were trying to do some death blow or any other of the mastery skills. It just unfortunately didn't seem to be very powerful, and this newer buff sadly just probably skip. I hope that someone figures out a build for it, but right now it just doesn't look too good for that. Then we have the Unbroken Chain. It actually received a massive amount of stats. So it's giving us 25 res, which is normal on the amulets. Then we get some extra movement speed. We get Pit Fighter. Then we have this massive amount of ultimate damage. And what was really nice over here is we've got Steel Grasp cooldown, and I believe this was changed to regular cooldown reduction over here. This just hasn't been updated, I believe, in the text. But casting Steel Grasp reduces Iron Maelstром's cooldown, and enemies damaged from Iron Maelstrom deal less damage. Even if you were to try to make this like an ultimate build, you could get any other amulet and get, like, if you get +3, it's usually around like 9x damage, depending on which passive that you get. It could be more or less, depending on what it is. But I don't think that this thing is actually like very viable. Maybe if you're trying to play like some sort of support barb, and I like the idea of this like giving some sort of less damage to your entire party, but I don't think this is going to be enough to make this viable. Again, the only update I believe on the most recent changes was that this became regular cooldown instead of the other one, which you can just get regular cooldown and then you can temper on like very specific cooldowns. So we'll have to wait and see if anyone figures out a build with it. It's basically like the crazy giant AoE with the Iron Maelstrom that you would get, and it does have a decent amount of cooldown, but yeah, casting it reduces the cooldown significantly, but this gives you all cooldown, I believe, is the change. So as far as the two newer unique items, I would say if I was a Barbarian main, I would not be very excited, and I've played a lot of Barbarian back in the previous season, whether it was Bash or Whirlwind being very, very powerful, and those are still going to be somewhat viable. There is some heavy nerfs, but we have some new toys to play around with, and let's check out some of the other options here. So with Opus, we've got some strength, some maximum resource. We also are now getting critical strike damage, which is good. We also get overpower damage. But the other bonus where you actually want this item, instead of being 0.4 as maximum, it's now 0.5, so it's way easier to math out. And if you start stacking a bunch of maximum resource, like with Harlequin or the Lockrun's Talisman or anything else, you can maybe try to get this to be up even higher. So nice little small buff here and there with Barb. And then the implicit is 50% more damage versus, like, I don't know, was it crit strike damage, which was what stores normally rolled. So this item, I mean, it's definitely nice that it's getting buffed. It was already seeing some play. There's a lot of different builds that can make use out of it. And then we have Ancient's Oath over here. So, I mean, it gives you a lot of ranks to Steel Grasp. It makes so Steel Grasp launches 2 additional chains, but I think it groups up things already quite well. And they take up to 60x damage. But remember, this is a two-hander. A two-hander is about 60% x anyways. But the thing that is nice with this that is brand new is just a flat cooldown reduction, getting 16% at the higher end. And if you get this to be 24, let's say on a greater affix, you start masterworking, critting on it, you get like 30% cooldown reduction on this. So if you are running a build that really desperately needs cooldown reduction for the Barbarian, you could maybe consider running Ancient's Oath, as the stats aren't like terrible. I mean, you get like 130 vulnerable damage, you get some strength, but as far as this goes, yeah, I mean, you're going to definitely have to use it. It's just basically equalizing the playing field, the only bonus that you get. Like, you could put 500 ranks to Steel Grasp. Actually, I don't know if that at that point it might actually deal some damage or something. But like for the most part, like giving a bunch of ranks to this isn't going to make it like super good. But it's mainly the cooldown reduction that you're looking forward to with that item. Next up, the item that I'm actually most excited about as someone that played a lot of Barb last season, with the Hellhammer, we get some strength, we get upheaval size, which is kind of nice, and then we have plus up to 6 ranks on upheaval, which would go to plus 9 with a greater affix. We also have wallop. But then the thing that I really like with this is you can become a strength stacker because it's a special power where upheaval ignites the burning ground. It does some sort of amount of damage. Now, I don't know if this number is like changed because it's really hard to gauge what the damage actually is, even though it shows it here. It depends on who's looking at the item. But the thing that I think is really good is if you can get this multiplier up very high. I'm not sure what this person has for strength. My assumption is probably around like 2,200. But if you can get like 3,000 plus strength, I mean, getting a multiplier of this magnitude could be pretty good. This isn't any lucky hit activation chance. This is every single time you use this, it's going to ignite. There was a newer aspect that gives you some extra bonus to like some sort of dot damage, and we really haven't seen too many like other variants of dot damage from Barbarian other than bleed. So it's going to be cool to see if there's some sort of like non-physical damage bonus that you can scale, especially since Ragnarok's boots can actually activate and give you even more bonus to non-physical, which obviously I'm assuming that it says ignite. This is going to be considered fire damage. So this could be another way to scale it. So I like that idea of like no cap. That's one thing that I really want Diablo 4 to not have is caps, because when you have a cap on something, it kind of deletes the whole idea and identity of making like some sort of build all around this one specific thing. If you've played Path of Exile, it's like Hollowed Palm. I like that idea of investing everything into like main stat or everything into like this very specific thing. But then when you have a cap of like 40x, it's just like, okay, why even bother? I'll hit the cap and then I'll go build something else. And that ruins like this whole idea of like, I want to just build this stat, right? So this is something I'm looking forward to because again, it has no cap. Anyways, Overkill, this has to do with Death Blow, where you're able to make it so Death Blow is going to create a shockwave and deal its percent of damage. Enemies who died to this effect also reset its cooldown, but like it doesn't really matter when you have the other item that gives it no cooldown. So I don't know if I could see this seeing some play because again, this is just, it creates a shockwave. So in the single target, you're still going to be out of luck. So unfortunately, I don't really find this to be very exciting, even though the stats are, you know, increased overall across the board. Just not something I think that is going to be seeing some play. Next up, Fields of Crimson. Another thing that like, okay, when you use this weapon, when you deal Rupture, you go pool of damage. So I can get, on a two-hander, 30x increased damage. Now, it does do a flat amount of damage, but I don't know how good that actual damage is going to be. But we're looking at like Diablo 3 numbers where it's like, okay, just give it 500% damage. But remember, this is not an X. Every time it's not an X, on a two-hander, it's very, very bad. But then we get enhanced rupture explosion size, so you can maybe mess around with this. But I think overall, there's just much better options. I think people will probably end up playing Flay as well as Bash once again, so it's going to be kind of the similar stuff that we already played in the previous season. Now, we also have some bonuses to Frenzy, but Frenzy was never really strong. I tried making this build in Season 4 and then played Bash Barb, and then I was like, what am I doing? There's not enough multipliers on Frenzy to really make it a realistic skill. Now, what I think is interesting is, like, when you use Frenzy, it's supposed to give a lot of attack speed to your other skills. So I guess the idea would be to, like, ramp up with Frenzy and then do something else to maybe get, like, a big damage, like, payload. But there is already Hoda. Hoda is getting some buffs too, and there's actually some bonuses to like bosses for Hoda that make it a little bit more smooth. But they kind of phased out Hoda because it was specifically the bug that was making that skill really good. It was giving just crazy amounts of damage based on like your resource. There's also 100,000 steps, which I don't even know why this item is like exists. So you have this thing where like you can gain a set amount of fury every 10 seconds. This cooldown is so long that I just don't see it being viable. So we get like movement speed, which is good. We get extra movement speed over here, and then we get damage to stun, which doesn't work against bosses. And then we also have ground stomp size. And then when activating a refreshing walking arsenal, it's gonna automatically cast it, and that's supposed to give you a bunch of fury. But again, the 10-second cooldown just makes us like not like viable. If it worked every single time you use ground stomp, you just gained like a bunch of, you would gain 100 fury. Then people could like run maybe the Crown of Lucian, spend all your resources, do a ground stomp, and then you'd actually kind of have a purpose to it. But then they also decided to nerf Walking Arsenal, which people already weren't running, and I don't know why they nerfed it, to be honest. Like, it's still backwards. I know their philosophy, and they said during the campfire chat, was like, if we nerf everything, then everyone's just going to play Walking Arsenal. But then you nerf Walking Arsenal, people are like, oh, well, then I'm not going to play it. Like, this is the one thing that people weren't playing. Just let it be good for a season is my philosophy with it, so I don't think these are viable. Again, Ragnarok's Wake is kind of the way to go. Rage of of Hargoth, these were already seeing some play, specifically for like the lucky hit when you get to inflict bleed on enemy, you get to reduce the cooldowns. It's got a 20% buff, which is actually a 50% like stat change over here, which is actually really good. You also have critical strike chance versus critical strike chance against elites, which honestly doesn't really matter that much. You also have damage reduction from bleeding enemies, and that got slightly a nerf for I don't know what reason. It doesn't have thorns anymore, which is great because like corners was kind of memes. But now you have extra life. So overall, this item is a win. It was already a pretty good item, so definitely invest into that. Then we have Gore's Devastating Grips, so it's got extra attack speed because now Whirlwind can scale with attack speed. We also got movement speed that helps out with Whirlwind. We get critical strike chance against close enemies, which did get a pretty nice buff. I mean, with Whirlwind, you could pretty much have 100% crit. It's not that difficult. There's an aspect that gives you a bunch while you continuously channel. It's also giving an extra 1 rank to Whirlwind, and then Whirlwind's going to explode every 2 seconds, dealing up to 70%, which is like, that's a 20% increase from the previous number. But overall, I just don't think, like, Whirlwind is the way to scale. There's not enough scaling on Whirlwind's multipliers to make it viable. That's why we all play the Dust Devils, the Dust Tornadoes, and that's kind of how we deal damage with Whirlwind. It's kind of unfortunate, but I don't think these are going to be any more viable. You would really need to give Gores, just give the old Gores back, let it stack up to infinitely, and then people will use it. And even then, it's like something that you have to charge up for so long. It was a really cool item. It was only really good in the first 1 week of the game, then they deleted this item basically out of existence and has never seen any competitive play. It's just unfortunately not very good because you're losing out on an aspect. You have to wait every 2 seconds versus just your flat out dealing more damage, right? But hopefully they can eventually get this to be good because it's for like a pure Whirlwind build, no Dust Devils, and it just doesn't support it. Twin Strikes, these items have always been bad, and they're still bad, and the reason why is like, okay, we get strength, attack speed, crit, and then ranks to whatever. This is like a normal item, right? These are all good stats, but then you have its unique power, and you would lose out on, let's say, like a 20, 30, X multiplier in damage. So after casting Double Swing 4 times, so that means on the 5th one, it's going to hit 2 additional times, and you get some X increased damage. So it's not just basically you get like 40x damage because it's hitting 2 times, so you're getting like 80, but that's on divided by 5 because it's only 1 out of every 5 attacks. So this item automatically is just bad. Like, I just don't see it being good at all. If it was like plus, 10 ranks to double swing, maybe you could, argue it's good, or like some of these stats are like way crazy. I mean, it does give you a decent amount of attack speed. That is one area where it's kind of nice, but remember, you're still losing out on tempering, and so you're losing on 2 additional stats that you can have on the item, and at that point, well, like you're losing out on like the damage while berserking to reach like other X multipliers, which you wouldn't be able to hit if maybe you were playing this instead. So even if you were pure double swing, no Dust Devils, it's still bad. Like, most of the time people playing, double swing, you're running Dust Devils anyway. So, again, I just don't think that item's viable. tuscom over here, it gives you some bonuses. Well, you could, like, berserk even harder, but then they nerfed, like, the bonuses with berserking on, like, one of the key passives. But you get attack speed while berserking. You get a massive amount of damage while berserking. So, before you get your Harlequin, sure, you can, like, cap out on that extra bonus in, like, the Paragon Dode. It's not, like, a terrible item, but it'll obviously be replaced, so it's okay. Ariet's Blessing, I think these items were always bad, even though, like, I uploaded a video talking about how unfortunate these items were. So what does it do? So it gives you max life, ultimate damage, massive amount of ultimate damage, right? And then we get this good amount of resistances, and then we have Call of the Ancients, cooldown reduction. The main problem that I have with this is, like, all you would be really using this for is maybe Call of the Ancients cooldown reduction. Now, it summons all these other Ancients, but the problem is that they only last, like, a few seconds. So if there was the way that this item would actually be cool, and I almost feel like this item is going to be like Eyes in the Dark. It's going to take like 7 times for them to buff it, and then they're eventually going to make it like actually cool. So here's how I think that they should design this item. Call of the Ancients just lasts forever. Just make it like Immortal Kings. It'd be really cool. So you always have like your little squad with you. I think it'd be worth it because getting all res is almost irrelevant now with Rakenos Booth, which almost every barbarian build will be running. Just run that, and then you're done with resistance. Ultimate damage, I don't see any ultimate builds being viable. And on top of that, life is okay, but the cooldown reduction, while that's a good numerical stat, you would just be using it for Call of the Ancients buff, where you could just run like Wrath of the Berserker, and then you just keep on shouting to get the cooldown on that anyways. But nonetheless, yeah, I don't think that this is going to be seeing any play. Just the Ancients don't last long enough. Then we have the Red Ring, or Ring of Red Fury. So we got some resource, attack speed, crit strike damage, then fire res. I wish it didn't have the fire res because, again, resistances are going to be way easier to cap out on Season 5. Anyways, we do lose out on the resource generation, which kind of sucks, but how it works is you spend a bunch of Fury, and then you would actually be able to get a guaranteed critical strike. It was really cool when you had like the Whirlwind. You would spin around for a second, and then you'd slam them with the Hammer of the Ancients. It was really cool because you could like build up certain things. Awesome idea, and it does give you a more bonus to critical strike damage, but I don't know if people try it out with maybe Upheaval or whatever, but I just think that there's just better options for rings. There is a good amount of crit strike damage, but again, I think there's just better options when you lose out on Temporary, because you want, like, let's say attack speed, crit strike damage, those are both great stats. And then like this like multiplier, well, again, it does give you that guaranteed crit. It's not too hard to get like 80+% crit anyways with Barbarian, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Plus, if you're actually playing Hoda, you can get enough crit to the point where you're at 100 anyways, so I wouldn't worry about it. I would say, unfortunately, this item maybe it just kind of got phased out. Then we have the Ring of the Ravenous, which I was kind of excited about. But then I was like, okay, well, what else can we mess around with? Because there's no aspects for specifically Rend, as far as I'm aware of. We get some crit, which is good, vulnerable, and then we get some brawling skills, so you can like maybe run a charge barb, and then Ren's duration gets increased by basically double. And then on top of that, the effect how it works is when you damage an enemy with a brawling skill, it applies 2 stacks of the Ren's bleed, and it can only affect each enemy every 1 second. So before it was 4, so basically they quadrupled the uptime on it. So if you can keep on stacking it, sure, if you can just like charge into things and you get really good cooldown, I think that would have been kind of cool to play. I don't know if it's actually going to be very good. As far as I'm aware of, like, this wasn't really good before. Now, if you really try to scale it, maybe you can get it to be like decent open world content. But as far as it being pushed, I don't know if that's going to be viable. I'm hoping it can be like okay, because I like to see like newer builds emerge. But I'm curious to know, what do you guys think about Barbarian in Season 5? Are you excited about any of these new tools? As far as I can tell, though, there's not really any like newer, really awesome builds to play. I was looking at kind of the options, also checking out Rob. He's an awesome Barbarian player, and he's like, yeah, we're playing Whirlwind and we're playing Bash, which I've already played before, and those are great builds, but I want to see some new stuff. And unfortunately, I don't really feel like there's anything new to the table here that really makes it viable, whether you want to try to play like consistent like weapon mastery, no cooldown. Like, it's cool in concept, but we're just going to end up playing Shard of Varethel and just kind of playing the same thing we played last season. At least that's what it looks like. But we'll be making an updated like build guide for those builds, as it was a really strong build and it's definitely fun to play. Anyways, that's going to wrap up things. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like if you're new. Subscribe, turn the bell if you want to see an update to some of the newer Barbarian builds, like specifically Bash and Whirlwind. Kind of things I think are the fan favorites, and we'll make an updated build guide very soon. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next one.